Comic Palooza is almost here. It's going down June 20th to the 22nd at the George R. Brown Convention Center. Comic Palooza is a must-do for me every summer. You have comic book fans, movie fans, wrestling fans, anime fans, and so many other fandoms, usually dressed up in their best costumes, all under one roof for Texas's biggest pop culture fest. And once you're inside, there is so much to do, like celebrity panels, interactive experiences, tons of exhibitors, and more. Check it all out and buy your tickets now at comicpalooza.com/CityCastHouston. Smashing those protein goals can be hard, but one way I start my day is with a high-protein breakfast featuring Jones Dairy Farm's chicken sausage. Jones Dairy Farm makes premium crafted meat products such as all-natural breakfast sausage, available in pork, chicken and turkey, and center-cut Canadian bacon. 100% of their products are made in the USA with materials sourced primarily from the Midwest. Jones Dairy Farm products are available at most grocery stores, including Costco, and you can find them in a store near you at jonesdairyfarm.com. Today on CityCast Houston, it's been nearly 4 years since 10 festival goers lost their lives during Travis Scott's concert at the Astroworld Festival. And now a new documentary on Netflix is recounting just how bad it got and how it could have been avoided. Joining me to share his experience from that tragic day is festival goer and my dear friend Jose Partida, along with journalist Zach Despart, who was part of the Houston Chronicle's award-winning team that covered the tragedy. It's Monday, June 9th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Zach, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Jose, welcome in as well. How are you, man?
Hey, buddy. I'm good. Thanks for having me as well.
Absolutely. Now, Jose, you had a chance to watch Trainwreck, the Astroworld Tragedy, which drops on Netflix tomorrow, and you were there as well. And I just want to first, say thank you for watching it. I know that's a day that you and I have discussed. It was very traumatic. It was obviously a day that changed the city. It changed you. So I appreciate you watching it. I know reliving that is hard. But what stood out in the documentary to you first?
Negligence. Obviously, right? Negligence more than anything. There was, in the aftermath of it, I followed it closely as I could, trying to see if, through my frustrations, if someone would be held accountable. And eventually it got to a point where it was just so mentally exhausting for me that I just had kind of like dropped out, and I was like, I just can't keep up with this. So seeing this so far removed from it now, I guess 4 years is far removed from it, was a little triggering, like you alluded to, but also shocking. Like some of the stuff we learned in the documentary was just, I can't believe I was there, frankly.
And for those of you who don't know, let me just recap this for you. The Astroworld Festival was a 2-day festival that basically promoted a good time. It felt like no rules. Just go in there, have fun, rage. That's a big thing at Travis Scott's concerts. And due to a bunch of bad decisions, it led to the crowd surging and 10 people dying. But there were so many moments before that. So, Zach, we just heard Jose mention that negligence is what stood out to him the most. But what surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, initially, what surprised me about the festival was the planning of it. I mean, for us, initially, it was, of course, just a big breaking news event. I was a reporter at the Houston Chronicle at the time. We had a reporter and a photographer who were covering it, of course, as just like an arts event, as a music event. It's a festival. And of course, turns into this tragedy where it's like, okay, this is suddenly a huge news event that we're covering in a very different way. I started covering it the morning after it happened, when we were all just trying to figure out like the very basic questions of like, how could something go this terribly wrong? What initially stood out to me was why would you have a general admission layout main stage set up like they did, where everyone is standing, there's no seating areas, you have people separated into pens, where it's very difficult for first responders to access people who might need help. It just like allowed problems to develop very quickly. and made it hard for people to get help once that
Yeah.
developed. So it just seemed like it did not allow flexibility for if problems went wrong, and then when they did go wrong, everything sort of snowballed.
And yeah, let me just explain those pens real quickly. And when you watch the documentary tomorrow, or if you've read Zach's coverage as part of the Houston Chronicle's award-winning feature on this tragedy called No Escape Plan, you'll see pictures. Basically, there's one way in and one way out. And, there's railings on three sides. Just to give you an example, when you go to Austin city limits, there's only barriers in the front that separate the crowd from the stage. So you have exits all around. I mean, it is free flowing. That's why you don't get this big crowd rush that would crush a lot of people. The way that Astroworld was situated was that Travis Scott had his own concert that wasn't being used at all until his performance. And in front of the concert stage, there were 4 pens where you only had one way in and one way out. And that's where a lot of the problems started. And Jose, you were in one of those pens. And I remember calling you afterwards to ask you, like, what happened? And you told me that it felt like that was it for you because of the way the crowd surged and pushed everyone up against each other. Describe that for the listeners.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough, and for my sake, that I was on the right side of the pit area. As soon as the countdown started, people were already shoving, but it was sort of manageable. It was just like the standard, like, oh, the show's about to start. If you go to a lot of concerts, you know that experience of people kind of like shoving your bag, trying to get a centimeter closer to the stage. It's dumb, but people do it for every show. And so I was just kind of like, okay, but as soon as the show started, it was just a horrible experience. And I've told you this before. I don't have any pictures of the show because my phone was in my pocket, and the whole time, the whole hour Travis was on stage, my hands were on someone's back to push them away from me, push them off me, to make sure I didn't fall. And it was just a very, like, it was scary. Like, it was a very just confusion. Just, I was fortunate enough. I'd never had an experience where I felt like I was for a lack of air, thankfully. Like that sounds like another layer of just anxiety and fear.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole time I was just shoving to make sure I didn't fall, because if I didn't push people back, which obviously I didn't want to have to push people, I would have fallen. And the other sort of anxiety for me is that I was there with a friend,
Oh,
and I was trying to make sure that at all times I had my eyes on him so I can make sure where he was. And we got split up, but luckily the whole hour and change that Travis performed, he was within my eye line. And to quickly talk about the barricades and just how awkward they were, I remember just obviously people just jumping the barricade so they could get help, or just to get out because they just couldn't handle it anymore. I remember thinking, like, trying to strategize, like, if it got to that point, what am I going to do? Because I'm really far from the barricade, and I know I can't go to my left because there's a freaking wall there.
wow.
And it just felt like a helpless situation. Like, I felt hopeless.
Zach, that was the overwhelming feeling with a lot of concert goers that day at this festival. But before that feeling even started, based on your reporting, based on this documentary, there were multiple times that this could have been stopped. In the beginning, when fans bum rushed the fencing and just jumped the gates and just ran inside.
It's important to, I think, take this one like way back, in the sense that when we started investigating what went wrong with Astroworld, the investigation starts at like, okay, 10 people are killed. Like, what are the events that lead up to this? And it's not just the hour-long crowd crush that Jose, was a part of in that horrible experience that many people described happening to them. It actually went back weeks and in some ways years before that. Astroworld had happened several times before the 2021 version. It is and was Travis Scott's sort of signature Houston, being a Houston native event, taking place at NRG Park. It was very popular. There had been instances in previous versions of the festival where it had been rowdier than other music festivals had been, where the police needed to be more involved, where there were more injuries than there typically would be. Those sorts of things should have let organizers know we need to do a better job of planning. Maybe we need to hire more staff, just knowing what has happened at previous versions of these festivals to get ready for this one. The other really important context is this happened in 2021. This was like the first major music event coming out of the pandemic. And it's easy to forget that because thankfully we're a few years out of the pandemic now. But it's important for a couple reasons. One, like a lot of these festival goers had not had the opportunity to like get out, go to a big festival like this, like be with their friends.
Oh yeah.
And Travis Scott was already known as like a high energy performer. I think that may have contributed to people being so excited to see him in that venue. This is not to say that the police and the people governing the venue didn't have a responsibility to protect these people. I'm just saying that like it was a kind of a higher energy event than even it normally would have been.
Just real quickly, I want to cut you off there because that is one of the big takeaways for me watching this. Like there was also no personal responsibility and community responsibility in this. I don't think that's the main reason, but when you have, you know, a younger generation that doesn't give a damn about the laws and just like, let's just bum rush this. Let's just go and act wild. There is some sense of that as well. Like in this documentary, you see people are getting crushed and other people are just partying. They're just having fun, not caring about their fellow man. So I just wanted to point that out. Like that is something that we should talk about.
It's the culture he cultivated.
Yeah,
like
it
that's,
is.
Yeah, that's the culture Travis cultivated his whole career.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's worth touching on more. The other thing I think is important about the pandemic and its influence is what it had done to the live music industry in the years since. And what we had seen in looking at the planning for Astroworld is so many people who had worked in security, in concessions, and festival planning, like those jobs disappeared during the pandemic. So the people you would normally hire to staff an event like this, like they didn't work in those places anymore.
Oh, great point.
So one of the things that we found really troubling was the only time the contract between Harris County, which oversees Energy Park, and the promoter of the show, Live Nation Score, the only time that contract was amended was the day before the festival. And it said, oh, the promoter is going to agree to hire more security guards because the county, which normally supplies them, cannot find enough security guards, which was a sign that there weren't enough people working in that industry anymore like there normally would. I think that was largely because of the pandemic and people had, got to find a different job. We had interviewed people who work security at Astroworld who had said they were hired the day before the festival, and some of those people didn't have any training. So what I'm saying is I have real concerns about the planning of safety at the festival, like how well these people were trained. Like all of these factors contribute to like by the festival, by the time it starts, like didn't have a great chance of success. And then you add in all of these other factors that lead to not going well.
Yeah.
So you have safety events that kind of happen throughout the day. There are people who get hurt. People describe rowdier events during the day. And then by the time, the Travis Scott set starts, he's the only person that's going to play at the main stage. And the way the planning of the festival works, it's like the last set ends on the other stage. And then everyone obviously who's going to see Travis Scott has to get from that stage to Travis's stage.
Yeah.
Right. So you have this huge migration of people from one stage to the other stage. And then we talked about this previous setup of like, okay, everyone is standing. They're going to be funneled into these pens. The pens are so big that the people who are kind of being pushed in the front, like if you were in the back, just like trying to get a better view and you're like, obviously a young person, just like excited. I just like want to get a little further. You don't realize that the person that you are pushing on 100 feet back inadvertently is pushing somebody all the way in the front up against the barrier. Like you have no idea that's what the chain reaction of events is. And that happens multiple times, like throughout the side of the stage.
And that's what, that crowd crush is what ends up taking 10 lives is because of that push. And there's just nowhere for that, wave of humanity to go anywhere, unfortunately. Right. And the Astroworld 2021, this is the year that happened, they were actually promoting and showing, from previous Astroworld festivals, like fans rushing the barricades and jumping the fence and this sense of like lawlessness, almost like rage culture. And guess what happened when you get to Astroworld 2021? It plays out just like that. So, Jose, when you're at the actual festival, to you, were there any signs before you even made it to Travis's set that things were off or things didn't feel safe?
Personally, firsthand, not necessarily. I do remember that morning seeing all the clips of like the barricades being broken, and by the time I got there, it was a little more calm. They had, I guess, sort of resolved those issues. But the only thing I remember seeing was like people on certain sides of the fence, away from the security, away from everything, hopping the fence.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw a little bit of that, but aside from just like the amount of people, like it was just so many people. And I just remember thinking like, this is going to be insane. Just a sea of people was just like daunting.
Do you feel that? It's the crystal clear waters of the Frio River flowing across your feet as the sun warms your back and the smell of wild sage breezes through from the hills of Garner State Park. That right there is the perfect Central Texas moment in Uvalde County. It's time to head west for a summer escape. Whether you're hiking under a painted Texas sky, floating around quiet river bends, or just breathing deep as you soak in the peace of the Texas Hill Country, this is a place to slow down, to play longer, and to laugh louder. Generations of Texans have found their peaceful escape in Uvalde County, and now it's your turn. Start planning your trip at visituvaldecounty.com. Uvalde County, escape to serenity. Follow the yellow brick road to the George Theater and let the adventure begin, because The Wizard of Oz the musical is playing live on stage at the George Theater from July 9th to August 10th. I can already hear myself singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow as I step into the land of Oz with Dorothy, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion in this beloved classic. Here's the best part. They have sensory-friendly performances, closed caption performances, an all-ages performance on August 9th, and matinee and evening shows, as well as one double feature day where they'll screen the film. How cool is that? Do something special with your kids, friends, loved ones, or make it a solo date and check out The Wizard of Oz the musical at the George Theater. Tickets are going fast, so grab yours today at adplayers.org or call the box office at 713-526-2721. Let's go to the actual concert now. This is where it gets hard, and watching this, like seeing the actual footage again, it was hard for me. I can't even imagine what you went through, Jose, watching that. This concert could have been stopped. As this crowd rush is happening, people are calling 911. There's multiple instances of, organizers telling each other like, hey, it's getting bad out here. Travis at one point stops a concert, and there was this moment in this documentary that you'll see tomorrow when you watch it. There's a body that appears to be lifeless just being carried out by other concert goers, and Travis Scott is basically saying like, hey, get him some help, and he gets help, and then Travis Scott was like, all right, let's resume the show. He stopped the show 3 times. Why wasn't this stopped earlier? Why wasn't this stopped at all?
He's singing the whole time. He's asking them to give that person help, by the way. He's like humming the rhythm of the song. He never really actually technically stops, which I guess is like nitpicky of me, but he didn't actually be like, hold up, stop the music.
Yeah.
Let's assess the situation. The music is playing in the background and he's humming the melody as he's telling the people to help check on that person and to give him space.
Zach, why wasn't it stopped?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it's like helpful for listeners to know about crowd crushes. Like they happened at soccer matches, they have happened at music festivals. So they are not something that is unknowable or unobservable. Like you can see and detect signs of them, and you can act to like kind of de-escalate when those signs develop. It's less about the total number of people at an event and more almost entirely about the concentration of those people in a space. And once you get too many people like per square meter, like that is when you have the risk of what's called compressive asphyxia. Essentially, it means like your body gets squished, your chest gets squished, your diaphragm can't expand and contract, and you can't breathe. And that means you can suffocate even if you are standing up. And that is in fact what happened to some of the people at Astroworld. Like you're physically just like sandwiched between other people and you can die that way. So one of the characteristic signs of a crowd crush is when a crowd gets so dense that people are effectively like smushed against each other and they kind of take on the characteristics of water. Like the crowd moves as a fluid. It almost moves as a wave because everyone is so smashed against each other. And as you guys know, the Travis Scott Festival was broadcast. It was an Apple Music broadcast. So we actually have a high quality video of the event. And if you look at the very, very beginning of the broadcast, they're doing some like big sweeping crowd shots. And you can see that wave, that very clear sign of a crowd crush in that video. And if the festival had crowd specialists, especially when you know the highest risk of a crowd crush is when you have general admission standing pens. Like it is studied and known that that is the highest risk layout for a crowd crush. If they had staff looking out for that, they could have seen that and stopped. They didn't necessarily have to cancel the festival. They just had to address that, relieve the tension from those pens. They could have resumed at that point probably. But there were clear warning signs before Travis Scott started his set in those minutes right before he did. And yes, there were many, many signs after that. Yes, people were starting to collapse right after he started the set. People were eventually being treated by medics throughout that hour. I think in our story, we documented between the first instance where medics became aware of an injury and the festival ended was nearly an hour. So quite a bit of time to elapse.
So you mentioned the Apple Music broadcast that was going on where you could see the crowd crushing happening through the wave-like movement. So does that mean that Travis Scott could see it as well?
It is hard to tell how much Travis Scott himself knew from the stage. I mean, he knew people were injured, but it's hard to tell. Like, I mean, people always need help at a festival. But festival staff and his backup house, the people he relies on to tell him things, and the people who are managing the festival, certainly should have known what was going on. At no point during the entire festival and during Travis Scott's set did they ever broadcast on any of the video boards or any of the audio messaging systems that there was any sort of danger to anyone. Right? At an event where 10 people were killed, they never did any of that and had the capability to do so. Like that to me is still shocking.
So let's talk about that, because there was even evidence presented that there were messages exchanged between people working the festivals that, quote, someone is going to end up dead, when talking about what was happening during Travis Scott's set. There was evidence. There was staffing shortages. Everything that y'all have reported on, the documentary showed. Why was there no accountability?
I mean, Live Nation and Scoremore, the promoters, were able to argue that they were not criminally responsible for the planning failures. To keep the guests safe at Astroworld, the Harris County grand jury never criminally indicted anyone for the deaths in the festival. It was an easier argument for Scott to make that he didn't understand or comprehend the severity of what was going on at the festival. A harder argument to make for the people who were actually working in the control rooms, who were communicating on radios, who could actually like see what was going on in the crowd. Obviously, grand juries are secret, so we don't actually know what evidence was presented and precisely what the arguments were made. On the civil side, a lot of those lawsuits filed by both the people who died, those and many people who were injured have already settled. Those settlements are confidential, so we don't know what the sums of money paid out were. I mean, there's a good chance the settlement sums were high, right? Those companies like Live Nation are insured. So there is some accountability that way. You could look at it. I guess it's sort of like in the eye of the beholder, and that like people paid money to resolve these claims, but no one went to jail.
Yeah, thinking about like even before the festival even started, guys, Travis Scott had already been convicted twice at other shows for disorderly and reckless conduct charges, where he's encouraging his fans to rush the stage. And there's, footage of this in the documentary as well. And he was charged for these cases, but not when people died. Like, how does this make sense, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's really hard to prove negligence criminally, especially when someone's on stage and their primary job is not to be watching out for the fans. I do think that the fact that he was cited criminally for something else he had done on stage previously is very relevant for the planning of the festival, though. It should have placed a greater onus on himself, on his team, on Live Nation, on Score More, the promoters, and the city and the county, all in the planning for the festival, knowing, okay, you've got a potentially kind of reckless and volatile performer, whatever, and a potentially rowdier like fan base. All those factors are really important in how we're going to plan this festival and how we're going to make sure people are safe. And yet, knowing all of that stuff, that's really important context, they chose a really unsafe venue plan. That should not have happened.
I mean, we touched on this a little bit earlier. This is the culture he cultivated, right? And I remember exactly the morning of the festival, he tweeted out, I think the same video they show in the documentary of people bum rushing the entry point to the festival. He tweeted that out that morning, that he wanted that sort of energy that day. The culture that Travis Scott had developed with his fan base, and I guess he still has sustained it to this day, is something that ultimately contributed to all of this. And it's disappointing. It sucks.
Jose, as somebody who was there, who went through everything, you shared your experiences with us. Who do you think was truly at fault?
Do I have to pick one person? Because there's clearly enough blame to go around. I think ultimately, if you want me to pick one entity, it's Live Nation. Frankly, from my standpoint, as someone who was a big Travis Scott fan, he completely lost me there. I obviously hold a grudge towards him over everything that happened that day, but it's Live Nation, and there's a few bombshells in the documentary. The transcript exchange where I believe someone from Live Nation tells someone on Travis Scott's team that they think there's 2 people dead already. And this was before Travis even brought out Drake. So before the concert got wrapped. So he probably went on for like another 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of blame to go around, but I think it's, as Zach was talking about just now, I think it's harder to make the case for Travis as the individual to take the brunt of the blame, and not for Live Nation or Score More, who I don't know if, I guess they just don't exist anymore. They got folded through all of this, but they just stopped operating Score More, the promoters.
Yeah, that Score More is part of the promotion team that was working with Live Nation to put on this festival. Just to give you some background on this, in the documentary, there was no mention of Score More at all.
None at all. No.
And they, like I was doing a Google on them. Seems like they don't exist anymore. And frankly, they shouldn't after what happened at Astroworld in 2021. Zach, I want to talk about what's happening now in terms of festivals. How did this change festivals in general, not just in the city of Houston, but safety, planning, everything when it comes to other festivals now because of the tragedy that happened here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to specifically talk about the government side. I'm a government reporter, so this is how I kind of approach all these questions. It has encouraged certainly governments to take a closer look at how they regulate these things. Certainly music festivals are still very popular in the United States, but this specific type of setup for festivals like really invites trouble. Like we talked about, just like having general admission, standing these pens, just really make it hard to solve problems like once they start. Jose mentioned Live Nation and their culpability here. I think those are valid points. I don't want to let Harris County, who owns this venue, and the city of Houston, where the venue exists, off the hook here, because they sign the contract with the promoter and have jurisdiction over the venue, right? So they let the people run the thing, but they're ultimately in charge here. So I think that governments need to be more careful about letting people have music festivals, but should be more careful about reviewing plans and improving them. You can have all kinds of performers, including ones that are rowdier or like attract younger crowds or that kind of stuff. If you have the right safety procedures in place. So that is, I think, what the main takeaway, one of the main takeaways of the Astroworld disaster is you have to step up and have that safety ready to go.
Zach, do you think we'll ever have a festival like this or any 2-day, 3-day, 1-day music festival again in the city?
I think it's possible. I mean, I think that a lot of public officials are scared to permit another one like that. And I get that, right? Because a horrible thing, the worst possible thing that could happen, happened at a festival they approved. But it is possible to have these things safely if you plan it properly. Austin has ACL every year that has way more people than Astroworld did. They haven't had this type of issue before. Other cities do much larger festivals. It's all about how you plan it and what safety procedures you put in place. Houston is a wonderful city. Energy Park is a really great venue. There are other venues in the city that can have outdoor events. I think it would really be a shame to so many concert goers in Houston to not be able to go to festivals. I would just encourage the city and the county to just really step up their game when holding people accountable on the front end of like, you want to hold a festival here? Cool. Make sure it's safe.
Yeah. Have enough staffing, have the right type of staffing, make sure that you have precautions put in place. Make sure you're ready for this because there is going to be a big crowd and something that we can do as a city, and I hope we do. Jose, you hit on this, but I want to ask you about Travis Scott. You've already said, you used to love him. I know you and I used to talk about his collaborations. We were hyped about his shoes, and you're kind of done with him, right? But since the tragedy, his tour was one of the highest grossing tours ever. He's still doing collaborations with Jordan Brand, with Nike. He appears on WWE. He's on various video games. He's as popular as ever. He was obviously not criminally charged. Do you think he was punished at all for this and what happened that day?
No, absolutely not. I mean, Nike delayed their partnership with him for several months. And then when they decided that it was okay to work with him again, they went all out. They had the cast of Euphoria style his first collaboration back with Jordan Brand right after Euphoria season 2 ended, when the show was the talk of social media. You said WWE. Also, FC Barcelona at Spotify just had him as the sponsor for their El Clasico matchup. They had a massive collection. Like, it almost feels like he's gotten bigger since the incident rather than his star status diminishing. So no, I just don't think he's faced any accountability. He hasn't faced anything. Maybe like in his heart to hearts, he knows, and he has to live with that. But absolutely not. In terms of his pocketbook, I don't think he's hurting at all.
How does that make you feel? Because that day changed you forever, and it seems like everyone else is just living life, and it's good.
Upset, really upset. And as someone who works in the sneaker industry, seeing people just so actively just foam at the mouth for his shoes. And to contextualize it for the people who don't know, Travis Scott and Nike and Jordan collaborations are among the most sought after, most exclusive, most limited, most expensive in the secondary market sneakers. And people will go through all the hoops necessary to grab them. And it's a little disappointing for me personally, obviously, to see people go through those efforts or to see people spend thousands of dollars on these sneakers.
After I watched this documentary, I was talking to our producer, Carleon Jones, as we were recapping some of the big moments. And I told her, I'm done with Travis Scott. Maybe this is a documentary that pushes it back into the limelight, that what exactly happened that day. And maybe there is some, punishment, quote unquote, with Travis not being as popular. But yeah, Zach, is there anything that we missed that you think listeners should know about this tragic day?
I mean, I just like to underscore for people in Houston just how preventable this was. It's hard to blame any individual entity or person. Just there were so many mistakes that were made that culminated in this tragedy that did not have to happen. And that's just hard to live with.
Perfectly said. It's a fascinating documentary. It's one that I hope everyone watches when it releases on Netflix. And I really, really, think you should also read Zach's feature. He was part of an award-winning team that won an award for this called No Escape Plan, which I've linked in our show notes. Watch that documentary, read this feature, and you're going to leave with a different point of view about what happened that day. Zach, thank you so much for joining us. Jose, thank you as well.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Raheel.
That was Jose Partida. He's a community and content coordinator for Soul Savvy, along with Zach Despart, who now writes for the Texas Tribune. I've linked his work in our show notes. The new documentary titled Trainwreck, The Astroworld Tragedy comes out tomorrow on Netflix, so make sure you share this episode with 3 friends you plan to watch it with. Hey, if you enjoyed this show, please drop us a rating and review wherever you listen. And if you're new here, please subscribe if you haven't yet. Want more Houston news? Check out our daily newsletter, Hey Houston, with the info in our show notes. Thanks. That will do it for today. I'm Raheel Ramzanali. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new.